In this episode of Trial by Stone, I sit down with Daniel Falconer and Stephen Saunders of WETA Workshop. Daniel and Stephen have worked closely with Netflix and the Henson Company on exclusive figures based off characters for Jim Henson's The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. This interview was recorded a couple of days before the release of the show via Netflix on August 30th. Thank you, Stephen Saunders and Daniel Falconer, for agreeing to this interview, and anyone listening, Stephen and Daniel both work for WETA. We are here today to discuss the figures for The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance, which is releasing August 30th, and WETA will be sort of releasing amazing figures that I saw up close at San Diego Comic-Con a couple months ago that blew my mind. I mean, I'd seen some other Dark Crystal stuff coming out, and then I saw WETA's and I was like, there's no competition here, so they're amazing.
Oh, dude, thank you. That's very nice of you to say. And you got to go to San Diego Comic-Con. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was really great. And I saw, I actually went there for the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance panel that they had, and they screened the first film. Actually, finally I can sort of go public about this, but I've been hanging out a lot with Louis Leterrier, who directed all 10 episodes. So I was with him when he was editing the episodes. I've been spending a lot of time with him. He is an incredible guy, much like Steven. He's one of those people where, yes, he's in the film industry, but he doesn't make you feel like an outsider. And sometimes people who work in your industry, they can be really nice, but they don't make you feel like you're a part of the group. But Louis is awesome. The show is amazing. And I'm so excited that you guys are sort of on it, essentially.
Wow. Well, I was excited about what we were doing, but after what you just said, I'm not at all jealous, not in any way. Why would you say that?
Yeah, dream come true, really.
That sounds amazing. I'm Daniel. Hi, everybody. And my buddy, Stephen.
Hi.
So, so as Jaime said, we're both at WETA Workshop. So WETA's a bit of a strange animal, and I think maybe I should take a moment to sort of describe what it is so that everybody understands. We're based in Wellington in New Zealand, so way down at the bottom end of the world, tiny little country of 5 million people. The city we're in has Wellington's, I think, population like 300,000 or something like that.
I think it's 500.
Is it 500 now? Okay, yeah, I haven't kept up with the count, but anyway, it's the capital. But we're like not even 500,000 people. So it's quite it's kind of a little boutique industry in a sense that WETA is started off as a very small company and has sort of grown with the projects, but we're best known for special effects for film and television, but that certainly doesn't describe everything we do. We basically are an artisan studio that our friend and boss, Sir Richard Taylor, established with his wife, partner at the time, Tanya Roger. Goodness, like 30 years ago, close to 30 years ago now, basically as a workshop where they and like-minded artistic and creative friends could come together and just make a living making cool stuff. And for the most part, that was film and television to begin with, but it's also now all kinds of other things. And basically, we try our hands at any kind of fun and creative industry, regardless of what it is, as long as it's creatively satisfying and fulfilling and exciting to us. So we're best known for doing physical effects and creatures and armor and weapons and miniatures and design for the Lord of the Rings. That was kind of the really big thing that put WETA Workshop on the map. And then since then, obviously, The Hobbit, King Kong, Narnia, Avatar, District 9. And Stephen, goodness, you should talk about the projects you've been involved with. Thunderbirds and Blade Runner.
Thunderbirds, we did a Thunderbirds remake series. We did miniatures for Blade Runner 2049. We did miniatures for Steven Spielberg's BFG. Yeah, but yeah. I've stepped a little bit away from all that, and I've been working with Daniel on the consumer products team doing collectible projects.
So in addition to all that film and television work, we also do public exhibitions, entertainment experiences. We do with advertisements. We've done publishing, and now we've also got a whole collectibles arm of the company where basically we produce beautiful little wee miniatures. Collectible art basically is what we try to call it, and some stuff sort of more at the knick-knacky kind of, what's the word for it, a souvenir kind of level, and other stuff is at the super high end level. Like we just unveiled last year, our big thing at San Diego Comic Con was a 1/6 scale tree beard that stands almost a meter tall, I think it is.
It's amazing.
Yeah, slightly over a meter. Really, really cool. Just super cool stuff. The kind of stuff that we all get excited about, because we're big nerds for all this stuff ourselves. I'm sitting in Stephen's home right now, and it's full of all the same kind of stuff that I have in my home, which is these cool Star Wars toys and Star Trek and Blade Runner and dinosaurs everywhere. Yeah, and just full of cool art projects. So basically, the short version is WETA does all kinds of stuff, including things. So we take licenses for properties that we've worked on. So we produce a huge and long-running line of miniature figurines and other things like that from the Lord of the Rings, but then also properties that excite us creatively, including back in the 2000s, we did a whole line of Muppet busts, which were super amazing. Fun. Oh my goodness, it was such a dream working on those. I wish we could have done more, because there's, again, very much like the Dark Crystal, there were so many characters to do, and we never got to all of them.
I think they were the coolest things I saw in collectibles at the time when I came to visit WETA. I think it was 2008. They were so beautiful.
They're really fun. And so that, and then obviously now the Dark Crystal. But just stepping back a little bit. So my role is that I was hired as a designer at WETA Workshop back in the 90s. And I was part of the design team working on Hercules and Xena TV shows, and then the Lord of the Rings when that came along, and other projects since then, designing armor and weapons and creatures and all that kind of stuff as part of a team. So we basically was a group of us who would sit around in a room all day and play the what if game. We would get information from the script, and it would be up to us to design, what does this world look like? What do these characters look like? And so we just pitch drawing after drawing after drawing, sculpture after sculpture.
Yeah, so you guys did design back then almost all in one room through sculpture, drawing, any quick kind sketches. Of media. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was really fun. And basically you'd present all that material to the director, and the director would choose what they liked. And my education for getting that job was basically, as a kid, watching things like the behind the scenes videos, documentaries for the Dark Crystal and Star Wars and all this stuff that I grew up with, because I'm old enough to have, I saw the Dark Crystal when it came out in cinemas. I was about 7, I think. And that was mind blowing to me. But then what was truly transformative was watching the behind the scenes documentary that came out on television, and we recorded it on our VHS player at home. And I watched that thing until the tape was like so scratchy and worn and stretched, it was barely discernible. Thank goodness for YouTube now, and for the DVDs, you can go back and find all this old stuff. But that opened my eyes up to a world where, wow, you can actually get a job in creating imaginary worlds and telling stories, and that kind of set me on this path. So the Dark Crystal I owe a huge debt to, because it was Jim Henson and everybody there, Brian Froud. What they created was so inspiring to me. How about you, Stephen? What was your path into the industry?
I feel like Jaime and I have had this conversation.
We have a couple times.
Oh, right, when you guys were talking Blade Runner, right?
This was on your other podcast on the Blade Runner. Fields of Calantha?
Shoulder of Orion, the Blade Runner podcast.
Shoulder of Orion, that's right. Yeah. But yeah, so similar story for me. I grew up in South Africa, and I think pop culture through film, through toys, through almost a little bit this lowbrow entertainment was my whole range of exposure to art.
Lowbrow. How dare you, sir?
Lowbrow. So I associated high quality art rather than lowbrow. High quality art with really well-made films, really well-made TV shows, well-made toys, and similarly got to the conclusion that I wanted to do this stuff for a living, but do this stuff seriously as a career. So rather than choosing the path of being a fine artist, I chose the path of trying to collaborate with the best people I could find in this endeavor of building complicated secondary world building, which really is one of WETA's strengths. And I came out to New Zealand in 2008 to try and convince them to hire me to work on The Hobbit. And Daniel was actually the person that toured me around.
Was I really?
Yeah.
Oh.
You don't even remember.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. But once I got here, I got so entrenched that I'm still here.
we were lucky
almost 10 years later.
Lucky to keep you.
Yeah.
And so both Stephen and I less involved with the film work. Well, that's not true. We both have some involvement with the film work that gets done as well. But both of us at the moment are involved with our collectibles arm of the company, our consumer products arm of WETA, where we basically get to dream up and create cool stuff to put on your shelf. And I think a lot of the time the decisions that are made around what that would be are driven by what would we love to have in our homes, what are we all passionate about? Because I think you get the best work from people when it's stuff that people are passionate about and that is close to their hearts. And that's definitely very, very true of the Dark Crystal and pretty much anything Henson's related for so many of us here at the workshop. It's such a source of inspiration. So when the word came down that the powers that be had been talking to Netflix about acquiring a license to produce collectibles based on this new television show, which we'd been hearing about that for so long. It was like there was going to be a movie, and then there was going to be, all these other things. I mean, you probably know much more about that than I do. But I've just been following the news a little bit and always hoping that it would happen, because of what that meant to me. But when we finally heard, actually, there's a license, I'm like, okay, well, this is real now. This is actually happening. And without seeing anything, any visual materials or knowing what the story was or anything like that, I was like, oh my God, we've got to go for this. We've got to do this.
So when was that? Sorry to interrupt you.
That was what?
I feel like that was
2 years ago.
Oh, so they weren't even in production then.
18 months ago, maybe, I think.
Wow.
I feel like I got involved about a year and a half ago.
Yeah, so I think it would have been about that.
Ago,
yeah. And so at that point, there was no visual material for us to look at. But once we signed up with them, Netflix was incredibly generous with the amount of material that they shared in the trust. When you take a license to work on something as a licensee making collectibles or toys or whatever, you're kind of at the mercy of the creatives and the production team and marketing team in terms of how much they want to share and how much they want to keep close to their vests because they're worried about stuff leaking out. And so we've worked with companies in the past where you get very, very little, and it's actually very difficult to do anything because you're working in a bit of a vacuum. But this was anything but that. They were so generous with the amount of material. First, we got concept art, which was amazing to see, especially when I realized, immediately upon seeing it, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is Brian Froud art. Oh, wow, they got him back. This is so great. And then actually starting to see photography from on set, and they shared literally thousands of images with us from on set.
Wow.
And more than that, we were given access to outlines so that we actually knew the storyline too, because it was really important that we could actually contextualize what we were, because it's up to us to pitch what we thought we should make for them, and they would have input and ideas and reactions and suggestions for us. But that's very difficult to do when you don't know what the story is. And so they allowed us to know the story, which meant being completely spoiled. So I know what's going to happen, which on the one hand, I'm a little saddened about, because when the show drops, I'll know what's going to happen. But the lovely thing about this world is it's so visually dense. There's so much to it that I know it'll be a completely new experience seeing it rather than just hearing about it or reading about it. So that's okay. And so I was having we have an open plan office, and I'm sure there were folks working who would hear me making little wee squeaky noises every now and again from my desk as I got to amazing parts in the story, and or a new image would pop up and I'd be like, oh my God. you know. And we've all seen the trailers now, so we've seen how beautiful the show looks. Well, you've seen the first episode, yeah.
Oh, I've seen more than the first episode.
Of course you have. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, the fact that we're all talking about this suggests to me that the confidence that we have in it is well placed. That if you're still this excited after having seen it, that's good news for all of us, right?
Oh yeah, it's my all-time favorite film in terms of like wonder, and the first film I saw, even after Star Wars, that I was like, where is this world I want to go? So to have people in charge of that world to bring it back and do it in such an authentic way, it's just right there is honor enough. But just to have been able to see it and sort of see behind the scenes, like, this is what we're doing, this is what it looks like. It's, you guys know, as you have been given access to all of that material, it's overwhelming, but it's surreal. It should kind of be immersed. To see Brian Froud's drawing, to see Brian Froud, this kind of Hollywood or Henson legacy people, it's just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also to see a friend there too. Toby Froud, Brian's son, actually came and worked with us for a while on King Kong back in the day at WETA Workshop. And Toby's an absolutely lovely guy, and we've sort of stayed loosely in touch over the years. But of course, I reached out to him once I heard about this, and we reconnected. It's in good hands, and you watch these promotional materials that have come out, these little behind-the-scenes featurettes and the trailers, and you can just feel the love and the care and the authenticity is just oozing from this project. It's everything that we as fans could have hoped it could be, I think. So yeah, that's exciting.
That's awesome. So, in terms of the process,
talk collectibles,
so sort of the bureaucracy part of this is done. You have this account, you have this contract. What's the next phase?
It's up to us to pitch what we think we could produce for them. So we kind of have to decide what product types we'd like to go for, and some of that's dictated by the license constraints. But without boring people on that too much on that, we have a relatively free hand to say, hey, well, what we'd like to do is this, because this is a type of product that we do quite well, or this is one we think will be popular. And one of the things that we went after straight away, because it's been very good for us in the past, was 1/6 scale polystone collectible statues. And the reason that that's appealing is it's a really nice size. It means that characters that are human size are around about a foot tall, which is quite a nice size to get a lot of detail in, and really, do honor to the characters. You can come up with some really cool poses. And of course, with the Dark Crystal, you've got such a size range in the characters that it meant that we could do some that were quite small and might be a little more affordable, and then we could do some that were quite large and that are definitely a bit more premium, but that they'd all be in the same scale, and that if you were the kind of person who wanted to buy a whole collection, you could you get them all and put them on your shelf together, and they would all work in relation to each other. They would all feel like a cohesive whole. So that was one thing that we were passionate about getting, and luckily we were able to. And then we also wanted to do some accessible jewelry inspired by the Dark Crystal, and we were looking at prop replicas and some other product types which we haven't yet unveiled, but we've got some other stuff in development that I think it's probably a little bit too early to talk about. But we're hoping to expand, assuming that people like what we're making, and assuming that people want more of it. We've definitely got plans to expand and do a lot more. It really depends on what people react to, what they like, and unfortunately, it does all come back down to sales. It's like how many units people buy. But it's tragically that is, we're all creative types, and so basically we just want to make cool stuff for its own sake because it's fun making it. But in the end, it has to be something that people are buying, and therefore we can afford to make more of. So hopefully they do. So we pitched to them that primarily. We want to do this range of statues, and have in that range, Skeksis and Gelfling and Podlings and little creatures, and bigger stuff as well, all kinds of things. Which luckily Netflix were like, yeah, go for it, great, we love what you guys do. More of that would be fantastic. So and as I say, they shared all this wonderful reference imagery. that we could pour over and work with, including in some cases we had digital assets to work with. Most of the time it was just photography, but lots of photography. But we also in some cases had scans of the puppets. I mean, Stephen, you could probably talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I can do.
Yep.
Yeah, so just to clarify, Daniel is our art director and for the most part, concept designer for the consumer products range.
Oh yeah, we didn't talk about that, did we? Yeah.
So I'm taking cues from Daniel's beautiful drawings, and I think that the goal with those drawings often is to try and bring a little bit of storytelling and a little bit of, like we don't just make statues. I think we are trying to tap back into that world building and into the storytelling with each figure we do. And Daniel captures that beautifully. So where I step in is basically I get to take one of those drawings and create the figure from it. And then we had the advantage of really great scans of the puppets and the sets and all sorts of things from set as digital assets that we can start from. So our puppets or our sculptures start from those scans. So they're really actually quite true to what was on set. And then we pull that into ZBrush, or in some cases we didn't have or decided to do it in clay, depending on what artist is available. So a few of the sculptures are done entirely in clay, and I'll just do little bits of jewelry and things in ZBrush, in digital.
Yeah, the process is quite fluid, isn't it? And sometimes on a single sculpture, there'll be some bits that are done digitally and some bits that are hand sculpted.
It really depends on
flowing backwards and forwards
on who can be shaved away from other film work and spend time. So the choice of whether it's a digital sculpture or a physical clay sculpture really depends on who's available and how they want to do it.
And luckily on this job, we had sculptors falling over each other to try and get on it, because it is, it's such a prestigious project to work on, and everybody has such a love and care for it. In fact, we probably had more sculptors trying to get onto it than actually we could in the end. So we would come up with concepts based on what we knew from the story and the reference materials, and I always try and design them so that there's the possibility of a little bit of interactive posing that you can do. So if you've got two characters that share a scene together, we would try and design the pose so that they could be put on the shelf together and look like they were in the same moment, so they might lock eyes with each other, or they might be facing off against each other, or they might be, just in sympathetic poses. We even briefly experimented with the idea of actually having bases that could lock into each other, but ultimately we ditched that idea because we were worried that it was too constraining for collectors, and that everybody has their own different shelf spaces and things like that, and so you don't want to lock people into just one way of displaying something. So in the end we just settled on little round bases, but for a while there we've got three sizes of bases, depending on what size the sculpture is. So the Baffy the Fizzgig is on the smallest size base, and then there's a slightly larger one that we've currently got our Podlings and Gelflings on, and then a larger one than that the Skeksis are currently standing on. And those three round base sizes are in relation to each other size-wise based on the sizes of the three sons of Thra. And of course, Aughra's the Eye of Aughra. So the notion was that then we would also have potentially, we had talked about having bites out of some of them, or sort of satellite half circles on some of them that made it look like the various worlds were eclipsing each other, or the various stars were crossing each other, because we kind of thought that really suited the mythology of the Dark Crystal. As I say, we backed away from the notion of them actually being able to connect together, but instead we still have these three base sizes that are based on the three suns.
It was a really cool idea, and we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make it work. I found that what happened was the sculptures got just a little too close to each other. They didn't have space to breathe, so when you have the bases connect, it's cool, but they're very up in each other's personal space.
Yeah, which made it actually kind of tricky when you have statues that are of significantly different heights. So, for example, if you had a Skeksis and a Gelfling that were supposed to be facing off against each other, it was difficult to get their eye lines to work because the Skeksis was basically staring down towards us. When you had them so close to each other, the Skeksis was having to look really, really low, and then the Gelfling was having to stare straight up into space. So having being able to pose them slightly further apart works a bit better in that case.
I do like how we try and make the sculptures interact with each other. Even if you're just buying one, there is the potential for it to interact with the other statues, which I guess is an attempt to make them, to spark the completionist in the collectible buyer to try and get them all, because they do sort of relate in a beautiful way to each other.
And I know I have those tendencies, right? Like I'm one of these guys that can't just have one of something. I've got to have all of them, which is really dangerous. And ask my wife about that sometime. But yeah, so there's definitely a little bit of that we have in mind when we're creating them. But more, it's just you just want to tell a story, and so and a story works when it's got multiple characters in a scene. So to that end, while our initial launch wave that's available now, I think by the time this podcast comes out, I imagine that the Emperor will also be available to order. But initially, we've launched with Hup the Podling and Rian the Gelfling, Baffy the Vizgig, and Skekso the Emperor Skeksis. But we've got more on the way. So, and in fact, we've got some materials that are going to be coming out very, very shortly, which will kind of illuminate some of the other characters that are coming. The challenge for us was, oh my goodness, where do you even start? Which characters do you do first? We really wanted to get Rian, Breya, and Deet out as in the beginning, but for various reasons, and production reality set in. You have a plan, but plans always have to change, and so Breya is a little bit later coming out. She's on her way. Stephen was working on her this week, right? Yep. So she'll be coming too, and then Deet a little bit further down the track. But likewise with the Skeksis, it's like, oh my goodness, where do you start? And usually everybody starts with the Chamberlain, Skeksil, because he's so great, and he's like the one you remember the most. I think casual fans remember him the most from the original film, and he plays such a big part in this new show. And so we definitely want to do him, but we also thought it'd be kind of fun to take a character like the Emperor, who we barely saw in the original film, but who plays such an important role in this new series, and who's such an imposing and beautiful design. It'd be kind of cool to start off with him as our lead Skeksis. So that's why he ended up being the first one that we went with. But we have other Skeksis on the way, and which you'll see very, very soon. Including some they're all cool, but some really, really cool ones. I mean, who knows whether this can ever happen, but in my dream is that by 5 years down the track, we've done all of them. That would be amazing.
Daniel's desk is just behind mine, and I occasionally look over and see him going through photographs and looking at all the other characters we haven't done yet, and I can see in his mind he's thinking, yep, we have to do this one, we have to do this one.
Yeah,
because awesome. They're all beautiful designs.
We're so spoiled for choice, right? There are so many amazing designs in this film. There's so many characters that all of them scream out to be turned into a beautiful statue. Everybody's gonna have their favorite that they want to bring home with them.
Are any of the Gelfling statues, do they have their wings visible? Can you say that or not?
You can. So the way Breya's posed, she's standing, so you can see her wings poking out from behind her clothing, and we are hoping that we can do Deet in a flying pose. But that'd be awesome. Yeah, I just think that'd be super cool, right? Sold. But but don't hold me to that.
I'm holding you to it. It's too late.
There are production realities around it that may influence whether that happens or not, but we would love to. Again, it's I hope so. I really would love to.
So I want to ask you though specifically, like, okay, in the process of design and coming up with whatever, how do you lock in? How do you guys lock in this is what Skekso is going to look like. This is his pose. Who makes those decisions?
So I come up with ideas, and sometimes there'll be multiple pitches, multiple concepts, and other times there'll be just one that we all feel strongly about. We'll discuss it internally first and get a consensus there. Richard Taylor, who runs WETA Workshop, who's our creative director and the founder of the company, the whole reason the company got into collectibles in the first place was because he has a massive collection of garage kit, statues and vinyl collectibles and stuff himself. So he's very, very passionate about this stuff. So he will generally get involved in that conversation as well and have direct input. In fact, he's influenced a lot of our character selection on this one. He's like, oh, you've got to do this character, you've got to do that one. So he'll get involved and give his sign off on it as well. And then we'll throw those concepts to Netflix in this case. They will take a look at it and discuss internally whether they think it works, and they may have some notes for us on that. They certainly had some notes for us on which Skeksis they thought we should consider, and they had some notes for us on our Gelfling poses and stuff like that. So they definitely have a voice in that conversation as well. And sometimes that means that we may do a couple more rounds of drawings and photo bashes to try and get it to the point where everybody's completely happy with it and confident. Or other times they're like, yep, cool, go for it. And then it goes to our sculptors, who will initially do a quick mock-up, just a really rough bash out to try and either in digitally or physically, to get the pose working in 3D, because of course it's easy to accidentally tell a lie when you're drawing because you're only working in 2D. Yeah. And so sometimes you can actually, something looks great flat, but then the moment you turn it around, you realize, oh, actually that leg can't stand that way.
It has to be a beautiful looking object from all angles.
Yes. Yep.
And that sometimes means that a little bit of adjustment needs to be made here and there.
Yeah, so the two-dimensional concept is generally a suggestion, and then we lock it down further once we get into three-dimensional maquetting. A maquette is a three-dimensional sketch. Once we get to that point, and then again everybody has their input and we tweak, and then off we go. Once everybody's agreed, the sculptor is free to start detailing away and finishing up the sculpt, which is a process that takes many weeks, depending on how large and how detailed the sculpture actually is. The fastest one in our Dark Crystal line to produce would have been Baffy. He was, but ask Jane Winley, our sculptor,
would have been
Baffy, the Fizz gig.
You said would have been, like it wasn't.
Oh, it was. No.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I was just, Yeah, so Baffy was the fastest one. And Jane did a beautiful job with him. And then, all sculpting by hand. He was a physical sculpt. So sculpting in by hand, all those little wee hairs and things like that. It's incredibly painstaking. So she worked on that. And then probably got the Gelflings and Hup would have been the fastest after that.
Hup was pretty quick. Yeah, Hup. I did a little experiment with Hup. The scan from set, the puppet scan, was so good and so expressive that I more or less did a quick pose in ZBrush and printed it out. So we 3D printed it at scale, molded him, and cast him in Chavant clay, and then I tool finished him in clay.
So that's quite like a hard clay, isn't it? You can really
it's like a wax, like almost like a jewelry wax, where you can go and get really nice extra little details and things. So he was sort of a chimera of digital and physical working together.
Mm.
And he was really quick.
But that was because the three-dimensional asset that we were provided by was so good in that particular case. That's not always the case, and also. We often want to, often the things are scanned in a very neutral pose or a very neutral expression, and so we obviously then want to bring a bit more life to the sculpture. So there's usually a lot more working into it that goes on once we get a raw scan. It's not a case of, oh yeah, there's the scan, stick that head on a body and off we go. There's a lot more to it than that.
So when we were working on the Gelflings, I've been looking after the Gelflings so far, and I found that they needed just a little bit of course, when you look at the puppet without a puppeteer touching it, it's sort of like a piece of wardrobe. Its life isn't there. The life comes from a puppeteer picking it up and making it a character. So we had to do a lot of finding that character in the statue, not necessarily relying too much on the digital scan. To make it feel like a live character. So it's adjusting bits here and there, staying true to what it needs to be, but making it feel like there's actually, well, like there's a puppeteer creating the character out of it.
And I've noticed with Skekso, having seen him up close, like the closer you get, the better he looks. Sometimes with collectibles, I'm sure you guys know, the closer you get, the worse it looks. Like, oh, this looks great far away, and then you come up and you're like, the paint job's not great, but Skekso is so rich, and his clothing look like fabric. Like there's those photos that you guys have released of Skekso, the background is black. It's so rich and so dense that, it's really, really amazing work.
Thank you. I'll certainly pass that on to our sculptor. That was Hao, was the sculptor who worked on that particular piece, and he really did an amazing job. And that was I think the head was based on a digital scan, wasn't it? But then he worked into it physically as well.
He was entirely a clay sculpture, but we did the same thing with the head. We took the scan of the head and printed it out and cast it in clay, so you can retexture back into it.
Yeah. So how then worked back into it, but then all those costume elements that you're talking about, how sculpted by hand in clay. So I just want to give honor to that sculptor. Hao's done an amazing job.
He's an amazing, experienced sculptor, but this is his first collectible I think he's done with us.
Yep.
Yeah. It's got such a beautiful style to it.
Beautiful work. So I appreciate your kind words. That what you're talking about there to me is attention to detail, and that to me is intrinsic in this property, in the Dark Crystal. And that's the thing I love about the film itself. The closer you look, the more you can see, and you can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper, and there's more and more to see. So we really aspired to bring that to our collectibles as well, and honor the world the same way, so that there are details in there and little cool things. I mean, one of the things I just loved when we were looking at the photography of the Emperor was the fact that he's got his little wee second set of arms that you can see popping out the back of his costume, and they're sort of holding on to the ornamental carapace that he wears. And that's just so cool. I love those kind of details. It was really fun working into that and bringing that all into the collectible, and also making sure it's accurate. The initial sculpt, there was some reference missing from looking down into it, so we had to Howard to kind of infer what was going on in there. And initially he put 5 fingers on it because why wouldn't you? And then it was realized, oh, actually no. Skeksis, of course, have 4 fingers on all their or 4 digits on all of their fingers. So those little extra thumbs that he put on there were whipped off. And initially there were some photographs of that got out, and I actually saw some chatter. Actually, just this week, we saw some chatter from fans.
Oh yeah, I know those people.
Which is great. I love that, because those are our people, right? Those are people who are every bit as caught up and interested in the details as we are. And so when people see that kind of stuff and go, hey, that's wrong, I'm like, yes, you're dead right. And we will do everything in our power to make sure that it is correct. And fortunately, in this case, that's fixed. So it's, hopefully people never find, hopefully that's the last time people find, something like that to say, hey, this isn't quite right. But by the same token, I love the fact that people do, because they care about it. And we care about it too. And so we're desperately keen to make sure that everything is right.
We're usually in a position where we were involved, certainly you were involved with the original character concept design
on other projects, right?
On other projects.
Yeah.
So we know the object that we're creating a collectible for very, very well. It was actually quite enjoyable to find new things and discover new thoughts behind how these characters were designed and made. I did some jewelry for that piece for Skekso. In digital, and I could find there is similar motifs and forms in the jewelry and the staffs and the rings and things that all these different Skeksis characters have. There's like a motif that crosses over.
Absolutely.
And it's really interesting to see how they've been repurposed or used repeatedly on different characters. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, there's a design language that's established
There's
there.
a design language.
And
yeah.
as folks who work on films ourselves, we we know that the efforts that go into creating that kind of stuff and maintaining that consistency and putting meaning in, because when you're making a film, you're creating a whole bunch of visual material that sits on a screen. And some of it's really important, the characters, the expression, the storytelling, and some of it is there to support that and sits in the background. But something has to go there no matter what. So it may as well be something that has meaning rather than something arbitrary. And so we've always prided ourselves in the film work we do by bringing meaning into everything and making sure that everything has a reason for being there. And so when you go to see a film, or in this case a television show, or we're given photographic reference to work from to make collectibles from, and you see that same attention to detail, that same love of detail and all that meaning that's gone into it, it just, I don't know, me personally, it lights me up. I get excited as a fan when I see that kind of stuff, and it's a pleasure to be able to try and bring it into what we're making.
I think it's one of the strengths of how we do collectibles at WETA is that we are all involved in filmmaking. We are all filmmakers, so we try and bring much of the same methodology of how we create worlds into our collectibles, which is an interesting puzzle to solve. But there's definitely that inherent filmmaker sense in, I think even at WETA there's a history of doing maquettes for the film as a design maquette that ended up being a collectible.
Yeah, that's happened a few times.
Yeah, so there's a very clear direction. It's like a clear offshoot of our filmmaking that we ended up doing collectibles.
So what would be in terms of, let's just say, let's talk about the Rianne piece, which again is really, really incredible. What would be, from concept to finished product, what's the time on that? How long do you guys give it? Or is there not like a time, it's just when it's done? I mean, I know the film or the show is coming out soon, but I also know the pieces don't launch. You can't even get one until February of 2020. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The pre-orders are up for those pieces now, but the actual they're being manufactured as we speak, but they won't finally ship out and get into people's hands until later. So that those timelines are sometimes quite tricky for us to work out, and things do slip. Production realities happen. Generally for us, it's between 18 months to a year, well, a year to 18 months from start to finish, from concept to actually getting something done, just because there are so many steps in the process, and various different approvals. And then, you've got even once the sculpt is done, you've got sculpt approval steps to go through, and then potentially tweaks. Then the item has to be taken apart and molded, and paint masters and mold masters created. The work on them is done. So there are months and months of that process before you even get to the point where then it can be actually reproduced in our factories. And then shipped out to warehouses and out around the world. You are talking, a year at the minimum, and 18 months more likely, sometimes even more than that. So it is quite tricky when you're working a long way, and you've got things you've got dates you want to hit, like, the debut of a TV series. At the very least, we're like, well, if we can't at least ship them by then, certainly we can get the pre-orders up by then, so that people can see them when the show is coming out, and have an opportunity to collect them if they want to. But then, we're hoping to keep making these for years as well. So hopefully, as the series continues, we can keep pumping these out, and also help give fans like us of the Dark Crystal something to get excited about in the wait between seasons. So hey, well, if, we may have a year to wait for the next season, perhaps, but maybe we've only got 8 weeks to wait for the next statue or something like that.
In terms of actual production, so a piece is finished, it's been signed off, everything looks great. How is it actually produced? From what I could see of a teaser image that you guys released, it looked like all of these were painted by hand, but I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yep. They're painted by hand. Definitely, there's no mechanism in the process there. So we have our masters painted at WETA, and then those go to our incredibly skilled painters in the factory, who then replicate what our painters have created, and those are the production pieces that then come out. So, and generally speaking, they should match what what we have produced in the workshop. Sometimes there are slight changes where we've had to tweak the paint here and there for various reasons, but for the most part, we do our best to try and make sure that they are as close as possible to the originals that we've produced, the prototypes. Yeah.
And I don't know if this is too detailed. I'm just so do you have? Again, for Skexo, would there be okay, we need 500 painted and ready to go? How do you know how many to make?
Oh, that's the big challenge. So figuring out, so Skexo is going to be a limited edition piece. But even for the open edition pieces, such as Rian and Hup, where we say, you know what, we're just going to keep making these as long as people want them. You still have to decide exactly how many you're going to begin with to meet demand, and how many you're going to ship with, and how many you might do in a subsequent run. But for a character like Skexo, excellent question. He is going to be limited edition, so we have to figure out what's the number that we want to hit, which gives everybody enough of a chance to get one who wants one, but then also we don't make so many that then there are hundreds sitting in warehouses that take years to sell, because nobody wants that either. So ideally, we want to try and find a number there that is the sweet spot between being limited and sought after, but not being so exclusive that you leave a whole lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth because they didn't manage to get one because they sold out too quickly. Mm-hmm. And that's that's the $1 million question right there. That's getting that number right is really tough, because of course also the fewer you make, the more expensive they tend to have to be, because you've still got to make, it's a business at the end of the day, and you've still got to make back your investment and all the tooling and the production of this piece. So the fewer you make means the fewer you have to get that money back. Whereas the more you make, then the cheaper they can potentially be. But then, you run the risk of having too many, and that's the last thing we want as well.
There's no perfect system for figuring this out. Whenever you're making new pieces of pop culture, whether it's a new film or a new collectible, you really have to almost go by gut instinct to try and figure out how popular is it going to be.
Yep.
How much of a demand is there actually going to be? It's the constant struggle. That's why we have so many sequels, because at least a sequel then has some predictability on the popularity of it.
Right. Yep. But yeah, I mean, it's a challenge for us. A great example, as we record this, just last week for the Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth collectibles, we launched Galadriel in her dark and frightening form.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That it's a gorgeous piece sculpted by Brigitte West, who's one of our most experienced and talented sculptors. Stunning piece. That sold out in, I think that had an edition size of 600, and it sold out in 88 minutes. So so that's one where it was very, very sought after, and we produced quite a limited run. So I think in some cases we are probably a little on the conservative side, and we'll tend to produce fewer in the hopes that so that we can be assured that piece is going to move quickly. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're somebody out there who may be interested in the Emperor, don't wait around too long. But yeah,
that's also not the first time. This has happened with a few of our pieces, that they sell out within the first hour or two.
And
it can be on pre-order.
It can be surprising to us too, which ones move really, really fast and which ones are a little slower. It's very hard to predict. Yeah. We need an orrery to look into predict these things, I think.
In terms of pieces that are ready to go, even though they're not going to be sold until February, is that because you're trying to finish the stock of them? So you'll have however many pieces slated for Rian or for Skexo or for Buffy. You're trying to sort of finish that line before you start selling them? Is that how it goes?
You'll finish the number that we've initially decided to make first, and then ship it all out at once.
Yep.
It won't. I don't think it drip feeds.
No. So, but what we may do is do subsequent for those open edition pieces where there's no limit on how many we can produce. If the initial runs, if say we produce 500 or 1,000 initially, if that sells quickly, and the pre-orders sell out, we'll hit go button on doing a bunch more. But it takes that time between now and February for the factory to produce them all and ship them all out, and send them all out to everyone. But we're committed to those. Those are happening. Those are being made right now for sure, and they're available to pre-order right now, either through us or through other retailers who stock them. But meanwhile, while that's happening, we're not sitting on our hands. We've got other pieces coming along. So you'll see Brea very, very soon. She's going to follow pretty soon. We've got, what are we allowed to say?
I think that's probably all we're allowed to say at this point.
Well, let's say for sure that there are one or two more Skeksis also following in quick succession that you guys will see really, really soon, and some other characters. I don't want to say too much because it's also kind of nice to reveal these things as surprises for people too.
Yeah. Totally.
But we've definitely more news coming on those, and also, it's like opening your Christmas presents early, so we want to make sure that we save a few surprises for down the line. But rest assured, there are definitely more coming in all the different size ranges, more Gelfling, more Skeksis, other characters as well. There are certainly more to Thra than Skeksis and Gelflings. So without saying too much, there are definitely other species and other creatures on their way too.
Mm-hmm. In terms of your go ahead.
I was just going to add to that we are in a strange position where we're also making the stuff for ourselves. So we'll keep making what we would want to own.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with me and Daniel.
Yeah. And in fact, it can get the debates around what should we make next. Sometimes can be really quite animated, because there are only so many that you can make in a given period. You don't want to make too many, and then nobody can afford to buy them to collect them all. And with a property like this where you've just got such a rich smorgasbord of characters to choose from, everybody has their little champion, so somebody's saying, oh, we've got to do this character, and somebody's like, oh no, but that means we can't do this one next, and it becomes quite a challenge and a battle to figure out which one's getting it out next, and we're weighing the various merits and so on of each character. The Lord of the Rings line is a great example, though, where we've had years to work our way through it. That was a line that we started producing statues for back in 1999, I think it was. We started prototyping those, and with a few interruptions, it's been going ever since. So we've got literally hundreds of characters done for that, and we've had the chance to go back and revisit some because, of course, 20 years on from when we started, we can look at some of those early sculpts and go, you know what, we can do a better job than that now. And so we'll go back and we'll do a new Frodo or a new Aragorn or multiple new Gandalfs. Stephen, how many Gandalfs have you sculpted, Stephen?
I think I'm just behind Gary Hunt, is a colleague of mine that sculpted him as well.
I think I've done 7, and he might have done 6.
Wow, different Gandalfs.
Different Gandalfs, yeah.
So we're really, really hoping, because we love this property so much, we love the Dark Crystal so much, we're really hoping that this will also be one of those long-running collectible series, and that over the years to come, people will be able to build their collection of all the Skeksis, or, a suite of different Gelflings and also the other thing I'm excited about with it is all these other little creatures. It's just like one of the coolest scenes in the original Dark Crystal movie to me was the scene where the camera just took the moment to just drift along the riverbank and film all these wonderful little wee creatures popping their heads out of the reeds while Kira's singing her song. It's all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh my goodness, I want those little characters.
That's my favorite thing about it, because there's all these holes cut in the bottom of the set, and there are all these puppeteers everywhere making this whole world come alive with their hands. It's amazing.
So hopefully we get to honor that and actually do some of the less obvious stuff. A little bit more obscure but delightful background critters.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any? I know I've seen your mini epics, which are epic, which are amazing. Specifically, the alien, the black version of the alien, which I think just the detail's amazing. The price is amazing too. I mean, just for the level of artistry that you get. Is there anything planned like that for Age of Resistance?
Nothing we can talk about today.
Okay.
We definitely would love to do more of that kind of thing. We are restricted when we when we acquire these licenses for different products, we're also playing in a field with other companies. So, for example, Funko is producing, pop vinyls and action figures. When Netflix agrees to what we can do, it's obviously also you're taking into account what other companies are doing and making sure that nobody's treading on each other's toes. So we have to be careful. Any ideas that we pitch, we have to make sure that they're not too close to something else somebody else is doing. So that sometimes can restrict what we can make. But we're always looking for opportunities to do something cool. So we're
Let's not. We haven't really touched on it much, but we have done, of course, the Dark Crystal as a piece of jewelry.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then we've been doing prop replicas as well.
Yep.
So we created this Essence vial prop replica,
which lights up.
Yeah, we haven't done many
wow.
in the past. It lights up. Yeah, it's a cool little thing.
And in that particular case, it's the exact same size as the original prop that was made at Henson's. In fact, it's super, super accurate for the original prop that was made over there and used.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that we'll get to do more prop replicas as well, because those are really, really beautiful things. And obviously this is quite a small one, but we'd love to do some bigger stuff as well. But yeah, then there's the jewelry and things like that too. But thank you for the kind words about the mini epics. So for those who aren't aware of what the mini epics are, they're a line of collectible statues cast in vinyl that are around about the 30 US mark, I think they retail for.
Yeah.
And they're kind of like cute little wee stylized, kind of goofy, slightly funny characters from different properties. So currently we've got Lord of the Rings mini epics and Ghostbusters. What else is there? Battle Angel Alita, Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Alien.
Yeah, Alien. Yes, of course. Yes.
Borderlands.
Borderlands.
Ones,
yeah, and there's tons more coming. The mini epics. We've got huge plans for them. So there's a lot more coming for them in all different properties.
Those are terribly collectible. I mean, I've picked up one or two of them because they're round and they're cool and they're just growing.
This is the danger of working somewhere like this, is that like you walk away at the end of each week with your paycheck and then you walk right back into the same building and you spend that paycheck.
Yeah.
It's because we're all nerds for this stuff, right? We make it because we love it, but then we have to own it. So
well, what I love about
yeah, I was going to say we're making rods for our own backs, but sorry, you were going to say?
No. What I love about the mini epics is actually I'm not a fan of Funko. I'm not a fan of what's popular, and Funkos are really popular, so they're less collectible. Everybody has them. They're not very interesting. I mean, they're cute for sure. I just am not a fan of them. But what I love about the mini epics is it's like you're like, okay, Funko, we're going to make something that's actually detailed, that looks like the character. And it's not like a potato with a nose, like I love how rich the mini epics are. Like, again, the detail in the alien one and its dome and just the slime. I mean, it's fucking incredible. It just really is. Like the price point too is also really incredible, just for the level of detail, because as everyone knows, I'm not really a collector. I mean, I do own some things, but as a lot of people who do collect know, the more detailed things are, the more expensive it is. So to see something like the mini epics that are that detailed and that specific, so affordable, it's unheard of. I mean, Funkos are so popular because they're so cheap and because they're so simple, so.
Well, thank you. I mean, there's beauty in that simplicity, but I really appreciate that. It's a challenge for us because high-end collectibles is where we started out, and so we're good at making big, expensive things that very few people can own, and it's actually much more challenging to make smaller, more affordable things, because generally speaking, you need to make a lot more of them, so the risk is actually even higher for the company. But the mini epics have been very successful, and they are once again playing to what we keep coming back to this point, but it's artist driven. The mini epics are successful, I think, because they were the brainchild of Mauro Santini, who's one of our sculptors, who just had this great idea, this great aesthetic, and he did a bunch of drawings, and then he just went away on his own and made a bunch of beautiful sculptures of these stylized characters from the Lord of the Rings initially, showed them to everybody at work, and everybody just fell in love with them and went, oh my goodness, there's something really special here. This could be something. And then we found a way to make the numbers work so that they could be produced. So again, I guess that's the WETA story, is that as much as possible, while there are economics that have to be borne in mind, I think the best work is artist driven, is something that's been born out of a passion that somebody had, and a really good idea. So yeah, that's all on Mauro, and we will gladly pass along your lovely and effusive words to him. You know, this is the thing, because we're way down here in New Zealand, far away from everything, we're a little bit isolated, you know, and so often we're working away on stuff, and well, we've got the internet, we can pop in and see what people are saying. It's still amazing to talk to people out there who are seeing our stuff in the world, go to places like San Diego Comic-Con and get to have live reactions from people. It's really important, and it's great for the sculptors. Hopefully it's a shot in the arm, you know, because these guys are working crazy long hours working on their stuff, you know, passionately pouring all their heart and souls into their pieces. So it's lovely to get some feedback like that.
You tell us if there's any interest in just really quickly running through the actual on the floor production stages for making a collectible.
Sure.
Why don't you just quickly step us through it?
Yeah, just because there's so many people involved in making this stuff that isn't just design or the sculpture. There, once we finished a sculpture, say digitally in ZBrush, it then gets 3D printed, and that 3D print gets sent down the road to the workshop where it's finished off and model made into a physical object that gets molded, and that's done by Leonard and Dave, our two model makers down there.
Leonard Ellis and David Tremont.
Yeah, and then that goes to the mold. So a silicon mold is made from it. That's done by Shanti. What's his surname? Costa. Yeah. So he does these beautiful molds for it, and those molded pieces are then sent to the paint shop. So we do casts of them, and those casts are cleaned up by Stephen Edwards, and it's sent to. So we make generally. How many masters? Usually three masters.
Yes.
That goes to the paint shop, and the paint team run by
Jules German.
They do the beautiful paint finishes. That's the most exciting part for me, to go and pop in and see how all the little pieces are coming.
Yeah,
up.
because sometimes, like for a given Skeksis, there might be 20 or more different little pieces, right? And then these guys so you're seeing it all in pieces. Finally, it comes together, and then it gets the paint put on. That's when it comes to life.
The whole thing feels like we're making presents for ourselves. So there's a huge amount of people involved, and then those production masters often end up at Comic-Con first. That's where we have the largest amount of new stuff appear at Comic-Con, and then they'll go off to various factories we've got that produce the numbers, the pre-order numbers. Yeah.
Did we already cover, just in terms of like one figure from start to finish, like how long that takes from when the mold is made to when it's painted?
Yeah, we try to avoid answering that.
Okay.
For me, it's really hard to do because I want to work on everything. So I generally would do physical sculpture or digital sculpture and do a bit of the finishing and model making before things go to the mold. So that's generally where I'm involved. But I would really very likely be working on multiple figures at the same time. That's just the way I like working. So I can't really necessarily tell a direct timeline because there's little bits of working on many different things.
And it's actually very different for each piece too.
It is very
some
different,
go through very quickly. Others can be, take months or years to go through the pipeline. The Treebeard statue that we made for the Lord of the Rings, that was probably about 3 years on or off, with work being done and then it being put to the side and then picked up again for various reasons. And then other times you've got stuff that goes through very, very quickly. But the sculpting on any of our dark crystal pieces is usually weeks, and in some cases months, depending on how much surface area, how detailed it is, what there is to do.
Yeah, you could almost imagine that WETA is also this pool of people working on creative projects, and we'll likely get pulled into some of those projects from time to time, or struggle to get the collectibles through because there's such a huge quantity of other things happening that really the timelines is really difficult.
It is a balancing act, because in addition to this, the collectibles on any one property, there are also collectibles for other properties, and then as Stephen's alluding to, we'll have exhibition work and film work and that sort of stuff, and it's the same group of people that are doing all the stuff, and so we're often sharing resource between different projects. So luckily, neither Stephen nor I have to worry about managing that side of things, which is very challenging. We just get to do the fun stuff of actually producing the art. So I feel incredibly fortunate to be doing what I'm doing, because basically it's the job description that I would have written for myself when I was 7. Watching the Dark Crystal we get to play in these worlds, we get to talk about them all day long with other people who care about them every bit as much as we do, and we get to argue backwards and forwards about what would be the coolest thing to do. So that's a pretty fantastic way to spend your week. And in the end, the result is cool stuff that hopefully excites other people's imaginations as well. It's a great privilege and an honor, and it's not taken for granted that people like our work, and that's why I really do appreciate the kind words that you've shared, and I will pass them back to all the rest of our team. It's a privilege that we get to do what we get to do, and huge thanks to you and to the folks who are interested in what we do, because otherwise we wouldn't get to do it. So thank you.
That feedback is really important to hear from the audience or from consumers what really is working.
What they like.
Really invaluable to us.
And what they want us to do. So as we're recording this podcast, it's about a week before the show debuts to the world, the first season. So most people have only seen the trailers and that kind of stuff. They've got a sense of this world, but next week, once we're all done spending our entire weekends binging it, we want to hear from people. We want to know if you're a person who likes the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance, loves that world, loves the characters, and if you're interested in wanting to see prop replicas and statues and stuff of the things from that world, tell us what you want. Reach out to us, let us know on social media or by email what you like, what excites you, what you'd like to see, and we'll do our best to try and work our way through that wish list.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Just one last note. In terms of I think really what is important to me, I don't really buy figures. I mean, I do buy figures, but the ones that I do buy, because I'm very specific, what's important to me is I want something that represents what I love looking at me or on a shelf, reminding me what inspires me. And what I think was really special about what you guys do, and certainly as it relates to the Dark Crystal, there's been a lot of things released and great costume, but it doesn't look like the character. So to see figures that really look like the characters or are the characters essentially is a really, really special thing. And especially in a world where Dark Crystal has been very niche. It's just kind of been an elusive IP in some ways, so it's hard to really get your hands on it. So now we're entering a phase where you'll be able to get your hands on something that you love, and not just something that you love, something that looks just like the show. So I really, it's a testament to the skill of everyone involved in terms of the figure. So bravo to you guys, and they're just really, really great. So thank you.
That's very much the goal. So it really, that means a lot to hear that. Thank you very much.
To find out more on Trial by Stone, the Dark Crystal Podcast, visit www.darkcrystalpodcast.com or visit us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Dark Crystal Podcast. Thank you.